Since 1930, there's been a statue of a woman called Emmeline Pankhurst in a small park next to the Houses of Parliament in London. The statue is here to remind the British population about the work of an incredible woman who spent her life fighting for the rights of women. Pankhurst was born in 1858 in Salford, in the city of Manchester, in the north of England. Manchester has been the birthplace of some very important historical changes. In the mid-18th century, the Industrial Revolution started in the city. While Emmeline was growing up, the city was full of huge cotton mills, where the working conditions were terrible. Many of the people who worked in the mills were women, and these women, like all women in the UK at this time, couldn't vote. Emmeline was a very self-confident teenager. When she was just 14 years old, she went to a talk about the women's suffrage movement. This was the campaign to get women the right to vote. After this talk, she decided to dedicate her life to the movement. She became a suffragette. When she was 21, Emmeline married a lawyer called Richard Pankhurst. He was loyal to her and her work. Richard helped her to form various political parties dedicated to fighting to improve the lives of women. Sadly, Richard died suddenly in 1898. Emmeline and her daughters, Christabel and Sylvia, continued the struggle for voting rights for women. In 1903, they started a group called the Women's Social and Political Union. There were other suffragette groups in the country at this time, but their group was one of the largest. In 1908, there were big demonstrations for women's rights, but they didn't persuade the government to change the law. The Pankhursts were very disappointed. Emmeline felt that the movement would have more success if it acted more aggressively. She and her supporters sometimes broke the law, and they were arrested many times. But women still didn't get the vote. Emmeline and Christabel believed that the group needed to become more violent. Some supporters didn't like this idea, but many suffragettes agreed. They weren't violent towards people, but they broke windows, started fires, and damaged shops. Members of the WSPU group were arrested and sent to prison. Some women refused to eat while they were in prison. The suffrage movement was not always popular with the British population because a lot of people didn't want women to have the vote, and they were concerned about the protests. In 1914, the First World War started, so the group stopped their campaign and supported the government in the war. The war changed attitudes towards women. Many women took the jobs of men while they were fighting. Finally, in 1918, the British government changed the voting law so women over the age of 30 could vote. Men could vote at 21. This was not enough for Emmeline, and she continued to demand equal rights for men and women. Sadly, she never saw this happen because she died in June 1928. 1 month later, the government passed the law which finally gave women the same rights to vote as men. And just 2 years after that, the government put up a statue of Emmeline Pankhurst so that the work of this remarkable woman would never be forgotten.